All right, folks, so these are Garmin's newest fitness-focused smartwatches, the Vivoactive 5 and the Venu 3. So these are part of Garmin's smartwatch-focused lineup where both of these have plenty of fitness features like being able to track tons of different kinds of activities. They provide lots of health features like tracking your heart rate 24 hours a day as well as your calories burned. But they also have smartwatch features like integration with your smartphone as well as stuff like contactless payments and offline music playback. So while the Vivoactive 5 and the Venu 3 have different names, these are very much part of the same family of watches. In fact, they're basically siblings where they're very similar in terms of their core features. So you may be asking, why do these have different names? Well, it can be a bit confusing, and don't worry, you're totally not alone here. And the backstory is the Vivoactive name has long been associated with Garmin's more smartwatch-focused lineup of watches, and it evolved into the Venu series when they transitioned to AMOLED displays. And Garmin decided to bring back the Vivoactive name with the Vivoactive 5, but it actually shares the same display technology as the Venus. So you can very well think of the Vivoactive 5 as kind of like a Venu S or a Venu Junior or something like that. So yes, the naming is kind of confusing, and again, they do share a lot of the same core features, but there are some distinct differences between these two, including price, of course, which would make you want to choose one over the other, which we'll talk about in today's video. So starting off with price, the Vivoactive 5 runs $299 and the Venu 3 runs $449. And then when it comes to the options with these two, so the Vivoactive 5 comes in one size option where it has a 42mm case, and it currently has 4 different options for colors. And then with the Venu 3, it has 2 options for a size, a 41mm version and then a 45mm version, and again, different color options. And then this is kind of how they all look on my 185mm circumference wrist. For the materials and the construction, they all have a polymer or plastic main case, but the Vivoactive 5 has an aluminum bezel and the Venu 3 has a stainless steel bezel. The bezel on the Venu 3 also has this slight texture to it, but with both of these, they have a clean, classic look to them. And for the bands, the 45mm Venu 3 uses 22mm industry standard bands, the Vivoactive 5 uses 20mm bands, and the smaller 41mm Venu 3S uses 18mm bands. There is also just a slight weight difference between all of these, but really they're very similar, where they're all nice and lightweight and comfortable. And then when it comes to durability, all of them use Corning Gorilla Glass 3 to protect the displays, and then all of them have a 5 ATM water resistance rating. So they'll be perfectly fine for showering, pool swimming, as well as open water swimming, but you probably shouldn't go diving with them. When it comes to the displays, all of these have super bright AMOLED displays, where the larger Venu 3 has a 1.4-inch display with 454 by 454 pixels, and both the Venu 3S and the Vivoactive 5 have similar displays at 1.2 inches with 380 by 380 pixels. And then for how you interact with them, all of them have touchscreens, and the touchscreen responsiveness is really nice and reliable, where taps, touches, and swipes all work as you expect them to. And then for actually getting around the device, from the watch face, you'll swipe either from the top or the bottom to view different widgets that are available to you, like seeing your heart rate, your steps, your calories burned, all that good stuff. And we'll actually see more of these when we go over the health features, smartwatch features, as well as the fitness features. And then with all of these, you can also swipe to the right to perform a quick action, like you can have it set to access your most recent apps or widgets. And here's the rest of the options you have for that right swipe. Sadly, I didn't see a Tinder option in this list. And then all of these also do have an optional always-on display mode. So by default, when you're not interacting with the watch, the display turns off to conserve on battery life, and when you either turn your wrist, tap on the screen, or press a button, the display wakes back up. And then with the always on display option, what happens here is that when you're not interacting with the watch, the display dims to a lower brightness level. And using this mode makes it a bit more convenient to see your watch kind of at a glance if you're not directly interacting with it. But it does also require more power, so you'll get less battery life out of it with this option. And I'll actually loop back to battery life here in just one bit. And then one more thing in regards to the displays is that all of these also do have their new large font size option to increase the size of the text. When it comes to the buttons though, this is where they differ a bit, where the Vivoactive 5 has a 2-button layout versus the Venu 3, which has, well, 3. So the upper and lower buttons are the same on both of these and perform very similar functions. So with the upper button, this is where you'll press it to access all your workout profiles, and then from there, you'll just tap on a profile. And then to start your workout, you just press that upper right-hand button again. And then from there, you can just pause your workout with that same button if you press it again, and then press it again to resume. And if you want to mark a lap during your workout, just use the lower right-hand button. But once you are finally done with your workout, just go ahead and press that upper right-hand button to pause, and then you can save it by tapping on the screen down here or discard it if you want to tap up here. Oh, and then one more thing with that upper right-hand button is that you can also long press it, and this brings up a controls menu. So stuff like enabling the sleep mode, a do not disturb mode, as well as even powering the watch off. And then that lower right-hand button is also used all throughout the interface to go back a screen at any time, but most of the time you can also swipe from the right, which does the exact same thing. But getting back to that third middle button on the Venu 3, so this performs a few different functions. So first off, if you just short press it, what that does is it brings up the most recent apps or widgets that you last accessed. And basically, this is just a faster way of accessing any recently accessed apps versus having to swipe through the rest of the interface. However, the other function for this middle button is if you long press it, and what this does is it calls on your voice assistant of choice depending on your phone. So if you have an iPhone, it brings up Siri, and then if you're on an Android phone, you can either use Google Assistant, or if you really want to, you could use Bixby. But this brings up probably the biggest difference between these two other than that third middle button. The Venu 3 has a built-in microphone and speaker. So using that microphone, you'll be able to call on that voice assistant so you can do quick things like, "What's the weather today?"
Should be sunny today. Daytime temperatures will hover around 83 degrees.
But another thing that you can do with that microphone and speaker is take calls on the watch itself. But do note that with both the voice assistant as well as the call functionality, your phone does have to be in Bluetooth range because the Venu 3 doesn't have cellular capabilities on its own. But there is another trick that you can do with that microphone, and that has to do with text. So going back to both of these really quick. So with the Vivoactive 5 as well as the Venu 3, when you have them paired with either an iPhone or an Android phone, you'll be able to receive text, and it even has support for displaying most emojis. But in regards to replying, this is where it differs between the two types of phone that you have these watches connected to. So if you have either the Vivoactive 5 or the Venu 3 paired with an Android phone, you'll receive the text and you'll also be able to reply. And you can do this with either quick replies that you can actually customize in the Garmin Connect smartphone app, or you can use an on-screen keyboard, which is something new that they just introduced with the Vivoactive 5 as well as the Venu 3. However, if you're on an iPhone, you'll receive those texts, but you actually can't reply with those quick responses or the on-screen keyboard. And that has nothing to do with Garmin, by the way. That all just has to do with Apple, where they actually lock down reply functionality with iMessage to just Apple Watches. However, there is a bit of a trick though with the Venu 3 and its microphone and voice assistant function. So while you can't technically reply to a text in the usual way by like tapping on the screen, you can use the voice assistant to send a text. Text Ray, I wish I had some baguettes.
Message to Ray says, I wish I had some baguettes. Do you want to send it or change it?
Send it.
Done.
So it's kind of an interesting way that you can sort of reply or even just send a text if you're on an iPhone, but that functionality does also exist if you're using an Android phone. It's just that it kind of goes around Apple's iMessage limitation with non-Apple watches. Oh, and another thing is that you also can customize the behavior of that middle button if you want, where you have some options to set the short press and long press to do different things if you don't necessarily want to use that voice assistant. You can set it to do something else. But for the rest of the smartwatch features, these are pretty much exactly the same between these two. So both have Garmin Pay for contactless payments, and they both also have the ability to store music on the watch itself for offline music playback using streaming services like Spotify, Deezer, as well as Amazon Music. There are two differences though when it comes to the music features. So the Venu 3 has 8 gigabytes of storage versus the Vivoactive 5, which has 4 gigabytes. In addition, you can actually play music on that built-in speaker on the Venu 3. It is a small speaker on a watch though, so the quality is about what you'd expect, but hey, you can still do it in a pinch. And then you'll also have the ability to view weather information as well as calendar events, both of which are synced from your phone. And then when it comes to battery life, these are all pretty close all around, with the exception being the larger Venu 3, which can last a little bit longer. But you should be able to get anywhere from like 4 days all the way up to around 10 days or so on the smaller Venu 3S and the Vivoactive 5, and a little longer on the larger Venu 3. And the range of battery life mainly has to do with whether or not you use the always-on display. If you do want to use that, bank on more like the 4 to 5 days with any of these. If you don't use that feature, you can probably expect over a week before having to recharge them. Now, battery life will also depend on some other settings like how bright you have the display, whether or not you enable the blood oxygen saturation sensor, as well as how many outdoor activities that you track. But for me, I usually do about an average of about an hour-long outdoor activity per day, and I was using the always-on display mode on all of these, and I also had the SpO2 sensor enabled for sleep, and I usually got right around that 4-day mark. And then when it comes to outdoor activity tracking battery life, this is all in the same ballpark again, where with the larger Venu 3 does get a little bit more though. Okay, so now moving on to the health and activity tracking features. So all of these can track your steps. They'll track your heart rate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They will have SpO2 sensors for tracking blood oxygen saturation levels. They can track your resting heart rate. They have abnormal heart rate alerts. They can track your respiration rate, and they also can track your stress levels. And then they also all come with Garmin's Health Snapshot feature, which can take a bunch of those different measurements all in one, including your heart rate, stress level, SpO2 level, as well as your respiration rate. One difference though in terms of activity tracking is that the Venu 3 will be able to track your floors climbed throughout the day, and that's because the Venu 3 has a barometric altimeter, whereas the Vivoactive 5 doesn't have that sensor. But all of these do come with Garmin's latest and greatest version of body battery. So body battery gives you a number from 1 to 100 of what it assesses as your current energy level, and this is based on your sleep, your stress levels, your restful periods, as well as the level activity with just like everyday things as well as workouts. But something new that they introduced on both the Vivoactive 5 as well as the Venu 3 are specific body battery factors, as in it actually lists out actual events that either drained or increased your body battery. Like sleep generally recharges you since that's when you recover, as well as things like restful periods throughout the day, and then workouts will obviously drain your body battery. But something else new that comes with all of these is the ability to track naps, and these will also show up here as a factor when it comes to your body battery. Now, when it comes to tracking naps, there's actually nothing you really need to do here. So if you take a 5-minute nap or longer during your waking hours, it just automatically tracks it, and it has been spot on for me in terms of the time I slept. However, there's an additional, more manual way to track a nap where you also get an alarm. So what you can do here is just access the controls menu by long pressing the upper right hand button and then just tap on sleep mode. What it'll ask you to do from here, if you're doing this during more normal waking hours, is it'll ask you to set a nap timer. So that way it manually tracks your nap, but you can also make sure that you're not going to sleep through your next important meeting. And then another new feature with both the Vivoactive 5 as well as the Venu 3 is a new sleep coach feature. And this also takes in some of those body battery factors that we just talked about. So what it does is it starts out with a baseline sleep recommendation, and this can range from anywhere from like 7 hours all the way up to 9 hours. And this all depends on your age. But then it takes in additional factors such as your last night's sleep quality, your activities and workouts, your heart rate variability status, and don't worry, we'll talk about this specific feature here in just 1 second, as well as any naps taken, and then it adjusts your sleep recommendation for that night accordingly. And then with all of these, they also have Garmin's advanced sleep tracking where it tracks your time slept, it gives you a sleep score, and also tracks sleep stages. And then moving on to the morning after you've woken up, all of these also do come with Garmin's morning report feature. So what this does is that it's basically the screen that welcomes you with information that you'll likely want to see first thing in the morning, like your sleep quality, your body battery, your HRV status, as well as weather for the day, as well as some other information that may be important to you. And you can also customize what information you want to show on your morning report. And then one more thing in regards to the feedback is that when your day is almost done, around 2 hours before your scheduled sleep time, you also get a daily summary of what kind of day you had. So like here, it says I had a workout day, so it's probably worth it to start winding down and focus on recovery. And speaking of recovery, two features that both of these get are Garmin's HRV status feature as well as a recovery time advisor. So with HRV status, this is your heart rate variability status over time. So heart rate variability is a metric that's become quite popular with athletes over recent years as a good indicator of how well you've recovered as well as how ready you may be for training. And heart rate variability, or HRV, is different than just your heart rate. So heart rate is how many times your heart beats per minute, but HRV is the difference in time in between each beat. And in a very general sense, the higher the time in between each beat or higher HRV could mean better recovery and you're more ready for training. A lower HRV value could mean that you're not recovered enough, or there could be something else that's going on with your health. And that's just a very broad explanation though, and there can be exceptions to that, but I'll have some articles listed down in the description below where you can read up more about it. And then the other feature in regards to recovery is that all of these also come with a recovery time advisor. And this basically indicates the amount of time that it estimates for you to be fully recovered from previous training. And this is not only factors like your previous training, but also factors like sleep. And the number that you see right here, by the way, it's not saying like don't do anything for 50, 60 hours or anything like that. It's more saying that that's the amount of time for you to be fully recovered, like for a race or something like that. And then another feature related to sleep and recovery is Garmin's Jet Lag Advisor feature. And this is a feature that's only available on the Venu 3. Now, I haven't had any overseas trip with the Venu 3 yet, but I already did do a super in-depth look at this feature on one of Garmin's other watches. So what Jet Lag Advisor does is that it's basically trying to help you overcome the effects of jet lag by making recommendations on when and how much to sleep, when to exercise, when to eat, as well as the best times to take a nap based on your travel schedule. It is a neat feature if you do an overseas trip. The advice it gives you is pretty good too. So if you're an experienced traveler, the advice it gives you probably are things you already know, but having those reminders is still kind of nice to have. And then both the Vivoactive 5 as well as the Venu 3 come with Garmin's latest features for wheelchair users, where you'll be able to track metrics like daily pushes, and they also do have specific workout profiles as well. And then when it comes to the fitness and sports features, when it comes to sport profiles, the Venu 3 and the Vivoactive 5 share many of the same profiles, so plenty of running profiles, cycling profiles, gym profiles, as well as pool swimming and open water swimming on both of these. They both also have outdoor recreation profiles like stand-up paddleboarding, skiing, as well as snowboarding. However, with the skiing and snowboarding profiles, these will differ a bit in how they work on the Vivoactive 5 versus the Venu 3, and this is due to the fact that the Venu 3 has a built-in altimeter where the Vivoactive 5 does not. So what the Venu 3 can do is that it can actually automatically track your ski runs. Now, again, just like the jet lag advisor feature, I haven't had a chance to test this specifically on the Venu 3, but I already did do a video on how this all works on a different Garmin watch that you can check out up here. But basically what happens here is that the Venu 3 can actually automatically sense when you're at the bottom of the hill and then when you get back on the chairlift to go back up. And how it does this is using the altimeter, since it can track elevation change in real time. So what it'll do is it'll automatically pause your activity as you're going up the chairlift and then automatically start your next run as you start descending. It is kind of a neat feature if you do a lot of skiing and snowboarding. And although the Vivoactive 5 actually doesn't automatically track your runs, you still actually can track them though just by using the lap button. And then in addition, the Venu 3 also has a few other activity profiles like bouldering, indoor rock climbing, as well as hiking and floor climb, which also utilize the altimeter, since those sort of profiles rely on the altimeter to track certain stats like floors climbed. And then when it comes to tracking outdoor activities, the Venu 3 and the Vivoactive 5 share the same multi-GNSS chipset. So in terms of accuracy for tracking outdoor activities, both of these should provide extremely similar results. And I had zero issues with these, by the way, where both of these were very good for me with everything from running to road biking to mountain biking. And then when it comes to the data that these watches collect, they're going to be very similar there as well. So for example, for stuff like running, you'll get your pace, distance, calories burned, as well as cadence. But both of these also come with a new feature called workout benefits. So this basically spells out what kind of benefits you're getting from a particular workout. So like on this workout here, it says that I'm improving my VO2 max since I was hitting higher heart rate zones for a longer period of time. And then with all of these, they'll also be able to estimate your VO2 max for running, and they'll also have Garmin's fitness age metric, which is basically kind of correlates your fitness level to a specific age. The Venu 3 will also be able to track your elevation gain in real time during an activity, since it has a built-in altimeter, and of course your total elevation gain for the entire activity when you save it. However, you will still be able to see your total elevation gain on the Vivoactive 5 after you save your activity. And how it does this is that when it saves it, it matches up all the GPS data with Garmin's base maps, which they can then use to calculate your total elevation gain. Now, one additional bit of information that the Venu 3 will be able to collect, which isn't available on the Vivoactive 5, is cycling power collected from a cycling power meter and or a smart bike trainer. So with the Venu 3, you'll be able to pair with a cycling power meter as an external sensor. And for a quick primer, cycling power meters measure the amount of force that you're exerting to the pedals, and these can be from power meter pedals, power meter cranks, as well as smart bike trainers. And cycling power is basically just a great way of assessing your fitness and performance by providing another metric along with stuff like heart rate. So think of like you're able to maintain a higher power output with a lower heart rate, that could be an indication that you're getting stronger. And then when it comes to the other kinds of external sensors that these compare to, the list is pretty similar where these can all pair to heart rate sensors, speed and cadence sensors, Garmin's Vario radar and lights, with the biggest difference between the two being the cycling power meters and smart bike trainers on the Venu 3. And then both of these also do come with Garmin Coach, which is completely free, by the way. So what you can do here is you can choose different training plans and workouts in the Garmin Connect smartphone app. And these programs for stuff like running and cycling will design a training plan and workouts for you, which will then just automatically show up on the watch when you go to train. But another difference between these two, though, is that the Venu 3 has on-screen animations for workouts. So what happens here is that when you load in a workout that you choose from the Garmin Connect smartphone app that does have workout animations, when you go to do the workout on the watch, you'll also be provided with these animations, which you can use to guide you along your workout. Okay, and then last but not least, we should also talk about the heart rate sensors, which are different between these two. So the Vivoactive 5 uses Garmin's 4th generation Elevate heart rate sensor, whereas the Venu 3 has Garmin's 5th generation sensor. So both of these sensors should do well for most cardio-based activities like running and cycling. So like on this road ride here, we see very similar results between the Venu 3, which I wore on one wrist, and the Vivoactive 5 on the other. And then even for stuff like running, they're both going to produce similar results, but the Venu 3 may be a little bit more accurate. But where the 5th generation sensor will likely do better on the Venu 3 is going to be for stuff like weight training as well as high intensity interval training. And that's basically their aim with this 5th generation sensor. Still though, with weight training as well as high intensity interval training, with any wrist-based optical heart rate sensor on like any watch, there still can be inaccurate results from time to time. So if you want the most accurate results, it's best to pair with an external heart rate strap, which both of these can do. Now, one last thing in regards to the heart rate sensor. So the Venu 3 appears to have the hardware available to record an ECG, but that's not something that's available right now because that sort of feature requires regulatory approval. So that could come in the future, or it may not. And it's not really up to Garmin. It requires that approval first. But what I can confirm though is that the Vivoactive 5 doesn't have the hardware capable of recording an ECG. Anyhow, go ahead and look for updates on my Twitter, Instagram, something like that, if anything does change in the future with the Venu 3. All right, so those are all the similarities as well as the differences between these two watches, and there are plenty of differences why you may want one over the other, not only when it comes to features, but also when it comes to price, because there is a $150 difference between these two. But I hope this video did help you figure out which one's gonna be right based on your needs. Anyhow, if you have any questions about either of these that I didn't cover in this video, feel free to drop those down in the comment section down below. And if you found the information in this video useful, do me a favor and quickly hit that like button and also subscribe to the channel for plenty more videos just like this that are coming soon. In the meantime, have fun out there and we will see you in the next video.